I'm going to kick it off and then turn it over to Chris Sanders and some of the other DEQ folks, and to talk about a number of issues that we know are on folks' minds because we've been told so, and then other things that we think are of interest and importance for folks to be aware of. I just kind of wanted to give a general sort of status update in terms of our operations at the agency, particularly in the continuing COVID mode that we're in. I have taken the position that as long as there is an executive order in place from the governor and the state of emergency and so forth, and all of the COVID risks are still out there, until all of that is settled, we remain in COVID mode, as I've phrased it, and we'll continue to. What that means for DEQ is that staff continues to work remotely as much as possible. Our offices are open, and folks are coming to the office more frequently than they were, obviously, 3 or 4 months ago. But to minimize all risks, both to DEQ employees and to the folks that we interact with from the public and the regulated community, we felt like the safest thing to do was to continue to work remotely as much as possible, minimize the number of people in the office. I'm not aware of any significant hiccups or problems that has caused. If anybody out there is aware of a particular delay or a particular issue that has arisen because of our working remotely, I would certainly appreciate personally being made aware of that. But I have said on a number of occasions, the proof in the pudding that the DEQ staff has continued to do their job and to do it well throughout the entire course of this COVID pandemic is the fact that I've gotten very few calls of the type that I would expect to get if folks weren't doing their jobs. And so I'm confident that DEQ staff's ability to and as an agency, our ability to continue to do our job and do it well is borne out by the fact that that I'm not getting a lot of complaint calls about delays or anything like that. And so I think that's a testament to the job that the employees at DEQ are doing. I will mention that when we do come out of COVID mode, one change that we have made, and I don't think this is any secret, and I'm actually we're kind of proud of it. We've implemented a formal telecommuting policy for the agency that will be it's in place now. It certainly will be in place post COVID. One of the things that we've all seen, and I've talked with folks in all different walks of life, and the one common thread through all of those conversations when it comes to this topic and the ability, what COVID has shown that we can do, and what the way COVID has changed the world, is that we've proven that we don't have to be chained to a desk 8 to 5 in order to get the job done. And while we are public servants and recognize that there's value and a need for DEQ folks to be accessible in person in the office, that's not a daily, hourly requirement. They can do their jobs remotely. They've proven that they can do it, and therefore we felt like it was time to drag ourselves kicking and screaming into the 21st century, so to speak, and we've implemented a telecommuting policy. So you'll see that going forward. That should not impact anything from the perspective of the regulated community, the folks that we deal with, consultants and everything else. You should still be the DEQ folks that you normally interact with should continue to be just as accessible as they have been in the past, and I expect nothing less. the early on in the COVID, during the COVID, or when COVID hit back in March, and then subsequently we issued a sort of a guidance document, a compliance and enforcement submittal guidance document that's still in place. It was in some ways similar to the compliance enforcement memo that EPA published, but ours was significantly different was different in some significant ways. Primarily is that we intentionally left it open-ended as opposed to having a specific date. We wanted to give ourselves and the regulated community the maximum flexibility when it comes to compliance in the context of COVID. But it's important to note that the burden is squarely on the permittee to prove any impacts that are related to COVID. If there is proof that COVID has caused an impact on someone's operations from a permit compliance standpoint, then we certainly want to consider that, take that into account. We want to know about it. But that is the presumption is, and the expectation is, continued compliance with the terms of your permit as written, as if COVID didn't exist. But if in fact staffing shortages or testing equipment supply issues or whatever that can be directly attributed to COVID can be proven, then we would certainly take that into account. We're still not paperless. We're working toward that, and I think Krystal Sanders will have some more to say on that topic in a few minutes. But the guidance document that we published and is still in effect again allows for the electronic submittal of things, but specifically requests that those anything that you submit electronically by email to a staff member, whether it's a permit application to a permit writer or a response to a compliance letter, whatever it might be, anything that you submit to us electronically, we specifically ask that you follow that up with a hard copy, and that is because we still maintain hard copy files as the official file of the agency, and that the updated guidance that we published emphasizes that. But we will continue to receive electronic documents. Just want to have that follow-up, that paper follow-up. We also continue to have in place social distancing guidelines. Again, our offices are open. We're encouraging our staff to work remotely as much as possible. We encourage visitors and staff to conduct meetings virtually as much as possible. Does not foreclose the possibility of having a face-to-face meeting, because we recognize that from time to time there's some value in doing that. But just know that when you come to a DEQ office for a meeting, visitors and staff alike are expected to follow our social distancing guidelines, which follow all of the various CDC and Department of Health guidelines that you've seen, primarily mask wearing and staying separated, minimizing the number of people in the room at the same time, and those kinds of things. But those social distancing guidelines are in place and continue to be in place, in effect, in all of our offices. I believe that covers everything that I had noted. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to address you all today, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris Sanders and to talk about a number of issues that are on his plate.
All right, thanks, Chris. I hope everybody can hear me. Yeah, so to piggyback on what Chris Wells said on our scanning effort, we are not a paperless agency, unfortunately. We're certainly moving in that direction. That's a big step and will take some time. Thanks to our partners at EPA, DEQ has received about $270,000 in grant money. We chose to use that money towards our filing system. If certainly many of y'all are ex-DEQ employees and you know what our file room looks like, it is a lot of paper. And I'm proud to say to date, We've scanned, I think, well over 1 million pages of historic documents. This primarily has included facilities that have had water permits or air permits and have since gone out of business. Recently, we have started scanning our underground injection control records and also some old historic RCRA files. And we have already begun moving into scanning, digitizing active facilities who may have been in business for a long time, have a substantial volume of records in our file room, and we're looking at those and beginning to digitize those. So again, thanks to our partners at EPA and the grant monies that they have provided, we're getting paper off the shelves, we're getting it in electronic format, and we hope to soon make those records available to y'all and the general public over the internet. Certainly what that does, it alleviates a number of activities associated with public records requests. That is a significant resource burden on DEQ. To pull all these records and make them available. Many of y'all may have come to our office already and reviewed records, and some of these records that we digitized were available to y'all here at the agency in electronic format. So, but we're not there yet. We've got a long ways to go. Even though we've probably digitized well over 1 million pages, I would say, I'm speculating, but I would say we're probably 15% done with what we have in hard copy format here at the agency. So a couple challenges that we'll have to continue to work through. Obviously, we've got a lot more digitizing to do. Under the federal grant programs, we are required to protect certain information, and we're working with a contractor to look at how to redact certain personal information that complies with all the federal grant requirements. So we're working on that effort. We're also working with a contractor to make those records easily searchable, and that the search engine, once we put this stuff out online and to our staff, is easily used, and make the experience of looking for records easy for both our staff and the general public. Our staff, we are making these records available internally to our staff, so we have started that, but we have not yet put that information out on the internet. So we're very excited about this project. It's a great head start on one day going paperless. As Director Wells has indicated, we're not paperless yet, and we still do ask everyone to provide hard copies of any electronic documents that you may submit to our staff, because our hard copy file for now is our public record. So again, we're excited about it. We've still got a long ways to go, but I think it's very interesting. I think that the general public will very much appreciate this effort once we're done. So we're looking forward to it.
The question, I think for me, the main question that was asked by the panelists, and the question that I'm getting overall for my division is, what is the status of the baseline stormwater general permit? So this is a permit. It expires the end of this month. We have administratively continued this permit. We started working on it, drafting it earlier this year, and we thought we had plenty of time to get it issued really close to the expiration dates. We sent the draft to EPA back in July. EPA has 90 days to review it, and they took their full 90 days. EPA did have a lot of questions about how we run our program, and wanted to understand it. What the general impression that I have from them is they really want our permit to look a lot more like their multi-sector general permit. If anybody's ever seen that, it is very voluminous, and there's a lot of requirements in it. And I think we require a lot of the same things. We just don't necessarily have them all listed in our permit. We do that through some of our policies and inspections requirements and our SWIP requirements. So my staff's really spent a lot of time working with EPA to explain how we use individual permits, other industry-specific general permits, and the baseline general permit to regulate this type of stormwater in our state. So we did get our comments from EPA back on September the 29th. And so right now we are going through their comments and seeing what changes, if any, we need to make to our permit or to our procedures and those kind of things to make sure we satisfy their comments and are ready to move forward. So we're trying to do that as quickly as possible. So we are working very hard internally. We've reached out to a few people outside just trying to get their thoughts about some of the language we're considering. One of the first things that we're considering changing, we're going to change, is the name of the permit. The EPA doesn't like the name baseline. They think that that means we haven't progressed our program. So we're changing it to industrial stormwater. Again, after EPA's kind of understood how we've run our program, one of the things they did ask is for us to consider including some kind of industrial specific BMPs and those kind of things for some groups that maybe have a little bit more potential to have pollution. The two that was specifically mentioned was landfills and automobile salvage yards. Well, landfills and those types of facilities, we usually use individual permits on that, but we are looking at the automobile salvage yard. So we reached out to the Mississippi Auto Salvage Group just to kind of see what kind of BMPs that's consistent with the industry that they should already be doing, and we just try to maybe capture those in the permit. So we're looking to maybe put a few of those specific things in there. In this permit, we are adding that the rubbish sites accepting industrial waste is an allowed category. These used to be included in the solid waste multimedia rubbish general permit. So we're now including that in the baseline. So we're trying to make sure that we are only incorporating those that's required by federal regulations to have that kind of stormwater coverage and not inadvertently include anything that wasn't intended. So we're looking at that language. Some of the internal processes, EPA really had asked us how we consider and evaluate those covered under this general permit that may be going to 303 delisted streams and streams with TMDLs. So we're looking at that. I don't think that would mean any change for what got drafted in the general permit. I think that may just be something we need to make sure our internal procedures are in place to address those, and we probably will explain that a little bit better in the supporting documentation. One of the things that EPA is really does want us to include is explicit requirements for corrective actions and deadlines when those are noticed. And so we are trying to work with our ECD group on those, like how long does it take for you to update your baseline and implement those new BMPs when there's a failure in some of the treatments. So that's a piece that's probably going to be in place that we propose when we go to notice. So we're trying to work on that language right now. Another question EPA had is how MDEQ is considered anti-degradation. Again, I think this is more of an internal process than anything that will be in the draft permit. Just another couple of things to note is that there'll be electronic reporting language to comply with the federal e-reporting rule. And in the forms package, we're going to add a modification form because that hasn't ever been in there. So we're trying to wrap this up as quickly as possible. I would love it to be able to go to notice by the end of this month. I doubt that that's going to be able to happen, but we're hoping it's early in November. So it requires a 30-day public notice we'll get those comments and we'll try to work as diligently on those as we can. My goal is to try to get it issued by the end of the year. If we can get that, that would be fantastic, and that's our goal. So you don't have to submit anything right now. It's administratively extended, which means you have coverage. So when it gets reissued, we will send out the normal reissuance letters, giving you probably 45 days to respond to that you need to continue coverage or you need to terminate coverage for whatever reason. And then we'll start that whole recoverage process. So again, right now, you do not have to send anything to us. You still have coverage. Some other quick updates of other general permits is the ready mix concrete general permit is at EPA review. It's almost at the end of their 90-day period, so we should be getting those comments very quickly, and that one should soon come behind the industrial stormwater. The hot mix asphalt is got an advanced internal draft, so we hope it will go to EPA review in the next couple of months. The MS4 general permit expires at the end of February. We are behind on that one, so I've had staffs that started to work on that and see that if we can get that done somewhere in the springtime. And then the biggest universe we have, the large construction GP, expires at the end of December 2021, and we really want to try to get that one done timely, so we're already beginning to work on that one. So that's kind of the status of our general permits. I think that was all I was tasked to talk about, unless there's some questions at the end.
Okay, I think that's fine. We'll see if we get some questions. I think we may have Melissa ready, but let's go on, Mark, if you'll go ahead and go, and then I think we'll let Melissa go after you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Good to be with you here this morning. I'm Mark Williams, Chief of the Waste Division. I'm in the middle of my 34th year at DEQ, so I've been here just a little while, but I want to kind of give you an overview of the regulatory issues going on in the waste programs. I'm going to start with the hazardous waste management regulations. As you know, we manage the majority of the program in Mississippi under the delegation of EPA, with the exception of some portions of the cleanup program, the HSWA permitting program. We do have a regulatory initiative moving forward, and it will be pretty soon. And we have 9 federally adopted regulations that we will be moving forward, proposing for adoption. They include some changes to rules of response to vacatures of the comparable fuels rule and the gasification rule, the imports and export rules of export of hazardous waste, the confidentiality determinations on the hazardous waste export and import rules. We have a sort of a companion rule that we have to adopt as a part of the hazardous waste electronic manifest system program that began a year or more ago. And then we have the safe management also of recalled airbags, that rule, the management standards for hazardous pharmaceuticals, and particularly the amendment to P075, the listing for nicotine. The universal waste rule that adds aerosol cans to the universal waste program, and then the ignitability rule from July. The last one, and probably the more substantive rule that we had not adopted yet, was the DSW, definition of solid waste rule. As you know, that rule has changed multiple times, originally adopted in 2009, revised in 2015, was challenged, and major portions of that rule were vacated by the federal courts. And so EPA, under the directives of the courts, did update or go back and revise that rule. And so the final rule, it was adopted in 2018. And so we'll be adopting the 2018 version of that rule. Most of the portions of that, we're still looking at that language. But So those are the rules that will be adopted. And the schedule is, it is our hope that we'll be at notice probably in about a month and a half, about 45 days. We're preparing. So look for an announcement at the end of November, early part of December, to begin that process. And we'll announce how we'll be conducting public hearing as a part of that. As you know, one of the things that we've had to do a lot of during this pandemic is, just like this meeting here, we've had to do online public hearings. And that doesn't always provide the best format for people to comment, but it does provide, I think, a suitable format. And so, but I also want to just remark that that comments that are made at public hearings get the same weight as comments that are made in writing. So we don't give those any less or more consideration. So I do hope that you'll look at the various rules, and if you have issues or comments that you'd like to make, then you're invited to make those. However, most of these are rules that we have to adopt under both our federal delegation, but also under state law, which says that we have to maintain a program that's the equivalent of the federal program, federal regulations. So that's the hazardous waste rule. After we adopt it, then we have to go to EPA for authorization of those rules, and our goal would be to have our authorization package to EPA sometime in the early part of next year. Probably March or April is what we would be looking at. So that's the hazardous waste rule. The solid waste rule is a fairly complex update, and it involves a lot of different things. Obviously, we're going to be doing some language clarifying the exclusions in the rule. We're updating a lot of the definitions in the rule. The regs were originally written back in the early 90s, and so they're now approaching a good 30 years old, and so we're looking at making some updates to those programs. There's a portion of Subtitle D that we have not adopted, particularly the rule that allows bioreactor landfills and leachate recirculation. And again, because of state law and the provisions that we can be no more stringent than Subtitle D, those are rules that we will have to adopt. We are also looking at expanding financial assurance requirements for commercial or commercially owned rubbish sites in particular. And we're looking at how those rules might apply to industrial landfills, although we may not directly apply financial assurance requirements. We're also looking at some pretty wholesale upgrades of the rubbish site, rubbish landfill regulations. Many of you are aware that as Subtitle D took effect almost 30 years ago now, that closed a lot of our municipal landfills, but it redirected a lot of waste to rubbish landfills. And so rubbish landfills have continued to grow, and they range in size from very, very small sites to very, very large sites. So that has really dictated that we look at those regulations and the content of those, and in particular, the closure requirements for those landfills and how they're closed, and how people who own those sites have enough financial wherewithal to properly close the sites that they have operated. We will also be looking at some changes to the composting and processing facility regulations. These are regulations that don't have a lot of flexibility in them now, and we're looking at flexibility that will create some sort of categorical approaches to permitting. There would be certain facilities under both of those sets of regulations that would be exempt, and then larger facilities or facilities that handle more waste of concern, I guess you'd say, would operate under solid waste management permits. So hopefully we'll see some flexibility there. You will not see a lot of changes to the MSW regulations, except for the change to adopting the Subtitle D, the landfill regulations. You won't see a lot of changes to the land application rules. You may see some flexibility there, but not a lot of regulations for those, or to transfer stations. So probably the next substantive part of this rule upgrade that we're currently planning has been the coal combustion residuals rule. And so our plan is to move that rule forward as a part of this upgrade or amendment to the solid waste regulations. And that's one of the reasons for the delay in these regulations, is trying to get a final federal rule that's adopted so that we're not having to come back and continually amend the regulation. We contemplated whether we would specifically write these rules into our regulations, but because the universe of facilities is fairly small in Mississippi that will the coal combustion rule will apply to, we really felt like that effort was really not warranted at this point. So it is our plan to adopt the rule by reference. I do not have a schedule yet because, but I would assume, I would tell you that it's probably going to be early next year before we're at public notice. I've been saying this for a while, but it seems like there's always something like COVID or reorganization or other things that tends to delay that. But I do hope that we'll be at public notice in the early part of next year. It has been our plan always to put the rule out in an informal way and have an informal stakeholder meeting prior to the actual public process. And the reason for that is because the changes to the rule are wholesale. They're pretty substantive. So so that's something we'll have to do. And then I guess the next set of regulations that we would be looking at are the UIC regulations. Mike may speak to the water reg changes. I'm not sure if he's going to or not, but as you know, we're also in the process of updating our water quality regulations and making a lot of upgrades and changes to those rules, which are somewhat dated as well. The underground injection control program is regulated under those water rules, and the UIC regulations are there. So we're also making some changes to the UIC regulations, really just updating language. The language is fairly outdated. We are going to build some flexibility in there. The federal regs already give us this flexibility, and we already exercise the flexibility, but they're not expressed in the regulation. And it's flexibility to issue permits or authorizations for certain class 5 wells. This would only be a very, very small part of those class 5 wells, but there are times where a class 5 well is unique and offers perhaps some concerns that the vast majority of class 5 wells do not. So we'll be looking at offering that, integrating that flexibility into the regulations. In addition, probably the most substantive part of our change will be the addition of class 6 wells. This is the UIC program for carbon dioxide geological sequestration wells, and we don't have a lot of interest in those wells right now, but state law requires that we adopt these regulations and that we seek primacy from EPA. So we are following through with that state law. I want to just speak, the only other real policy change I had, as I guess, would be in our emergency disposal guidance. You know that for many, many years, we have held the position that we really wanted to avoid open burning of storm debris. We have allowed it in the past, particularly in large events, but we really wanted to avoid that. Our policies have been relaxed somewhat, so we do consider burning with forced air equipment where there are certain controls on emissions. We will allow that now under our emergency debris guidance for local governments and others that are managing large amounts of debris. And we really did that working with our senior management because of the options. As many of you know, for years, wood chips and wood debris was a fuel source for many with boiler systems. That market has really gone away. We don't have the markets for woody debris anymore. So going out and shipping up a bunch of storm debris and hoping that it might be used really has been challenging. And so we did make, with those considerations in mind, we did relax that somewhat. There's still a process for us to consider it. We still want to make certain that if you are going to be reducing debris through combustion, that you do so in a safe manner and you do it where you're not affecting others. So there are some siting criteria and other things, but our emergency policies have been revised slightly to allow that. I guess the only other comments I wanted to offer really are on both recycling and pollution prevention. I know many of you who have zero waste initiatives or initiatives where you want to avoid landfilling of waste have probably experienced some challenges with recycling. The initial challenge came when China began to place restrictions on U.S. recyclables being imported into that country, and that shut down a tremendous market for U.S. recyclables. It caused a glut, particularly on the West Coast, of recyclables that were being stockpiled. We saw many recyclables that had to be redirected to landfills, and so that has created a big problem. There are some, and then of course now we see COVID. COVID has been a challenge for recycling because as we've seen COVID sort of contract the economy, and we've seen local governments and others that have had to make some choices about their expenditures. And one of the choices, and one of the things that often seems to be on the chopping block, are recycling programs, particularly when they already have a separate collection system for garbage. So we have seen a number of impacts from COVID on recycling, particularly local recycling programs. In addition, some of the storms that we've had have also had an impact on recycling. I know most of the recyclables in Mississippi are going out of state right now. The impact of the China ban has really shut a lot of small MRFs down, material recovery facilities across the country. And so what you're seeing is larger MRFs that are operating. You're seeing transfer and transportation of recyclables long distances now to be able to meet those goals. And so a lot of materials in Mississippi were flowing to Florida and a MRF in Florida and other places. And because the storm shut some of those facilities down, we didn't have a place to go there temporarily. So hopefully those places are opening back up. The good news is that some of the things that happened in China resulted in Chinese companies coming to the U.S. and buying mills and buying other facilities to collect U.S. recyclables, process them, and send processed materials overseas, which are not banned from China, interestingly enough. So particularly paper, you're seeing a lot of Chinese paper mills that need U.S. fiber. China is a tree poor country, and so they do need the U.S. fiber. And so you're seeing those facilities begin to get built. You're seeing them begin to take operation, and you're going to begin to see that effect, I think, at least on the paper side, you're going to see that begin to affect U.S. markets. Plastics are always going to continue to be a challenge. The price of natural gas has certainly affected plastics and plastics recycling and the ability for recyclable plastics to compete. So that's a challenge. It will continue to be a challenge. Metals have held steady, but I think there's been some volatility there, but you'll see hopefully those programs improve as well. So the good news, I think, about recycling is that the federal government is very interested in helping stabilize the U.S. recycling industry. And so you'll see a strategy, I think, that will be announced pretty soon. They're already taking public comments on that national strategy that will hopefully give some initiative and jumpstart back to recycling programs. And so hopefully that will aid industry, because when local programs constrict or are constricted, that does affect your ability to recycle your materials as well, particularly when you're talking about non-processed materials. So recycling, we think, is headed in a positive direction. We are seeing increased value in the material recovery of residential materials that are being recovered. That value had dropped very low, but I think you're going to see that continue to grow. So that will go up, and that will be a positive thing. The final thing I'll address is our pollution prevention program. COVID has been a challenge to continue to hold that program and do the things that we didn't want to do there. But our program is still in place. We're still recruiting people to our Enhance program. Enhance is an environmental stewardship program that really recognizes those companies that go above and beyond the standard compliance requirements. And a lot of you are members of that program and participants and longtime participants, and we applaud you for your efforts. Some of you have been interested but haven't maybe made that jump. I want to encourage you to do that. One of the things that we're working on is what we call a pathway membership. It might be people who don't actually know that may not meet all the requirements. They may have had a compliance issue a couple of years ago, but this puts them on a path towards being able to be a full-time participant. And so that's I think that's a positive thing. And so I encourage you, if you're interested in being part of Enhance, visit that website, enhance.ms, and ask questions. We're still trying to conduct some ME3, some inspections and assessments in a way we assist industries in energy use and environmental issues. And then we're also still doing workshops and webinars, and you'll see some more announcements on that in the very near future. So I want to encourage you. We were recently awarded a grant by EPA to continue that program for the next 2 federal fiscal years. So you'll see that program continue. Hopefully we'll continue to make positive changes for the state. I guess the only other thing I was going to talk about is there was a bullet about permitting challenges, and the solid waste permitting in particular has been challenging. We reorganized, we lost pretty much all of the staff that had been in the permitting branch. We continue to have to replace people, and we continue to lose people. So that is a challenge to keep a cohesive program. And so we have a backlog of MSW sites, MSW landfill sites renewals that we're working on. We also have general permits that we have not reissued, and the general permits we're waiting on, that have been waiting on the reg change, and because we don't want to adopt a permit that then turns around and has some changes that are not from the rules. So those permits have been administratively continued. We do anticipate that those will be reissued probably fairly soon after the reg change. And you'll see us then begin to move to reissue it. But right now we're not fully staffed, so trying to issue general permits right now would be a big challenge. So there is a lot of backlog. And then on the other side, our permitting group handles all of our emergency debris sites, and we probably have a number of those out there that we've approved from the tornadoes in the spring and other events even from last year. So a lot of work going on there to keep up with that. I think that's pretty much all that I have. I hope I didn't take too long, but we'll entertain questions at the end, and I look forward to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, I think Mike Freeman's going to go ahead and go, and then Melissa has joined him in his office, and she'll follow him.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah, Mike.
Okay, good deal. Good morning again. I'm Mike Freeman. I'm Chief of the Surface Water Division. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to y'all this morning. I'm going to go over 2 kind of big endeavors that we currently have going on in the division. The first being the 2020 303D list of impaired waters, and then the second will be kind of go over the triennial review of the water quality standard regulations. So to give you an update, I was going to start with the 303D list. As many of you know, the Clean Water Act requires that the state develop a list of impaired waters every 2 years. The 2020 list went to public notice back in August, and the notice period has ended, and we had a public hearing last month. Staff is currently preparing responses to, we had a few minor comments during the notice, and we're preparing a responsive summary. So we hope to bring this list to the commission in a few weeks at their scheduled October meeting. A copy of the proposed 303D list is available on our website, and I hope you do get a chance to take a look at it because we have made some, I think, some significant improvements to this year's list by making it easier for the reader to understand the changes from the previous list. So it's been somewhat reformatted in a more user-friendly way. So a synopsis of what's going to be on the list, just boiling it down real quickly, there are 17 new listings for impairments. There are 17 delistings, which means the water bodies have either gone from impaired to a TMDL or impaired to not impaired through additional monitoring. The new list includes something we've done new, includes 58 Tmdl successes. And this means a water body has met the objective of the TMDL. And these successes happen due to various reasons. Some of them it's because additional monitoring shows that water quality has improved. There may have been placement of best management practices in the watershed that resulted in water quality improvement. We could have had wastewater treatment improvements through permitting, or perhaps even just the habitat improved. And then lastly, the list requires that we have to include planned TMDLs for the next cycle. So this list will include 15 new TMDLs that will have to be done in the next 2 years. Moving on to the triennial review, a little background on this is the Clean Water Act requires states to reevaluate their water quality standards every 3 years. And we've been working on our list. We hope to be going to public notice with the water quality standard regulations in the next few weeks. Let me give you a quick rundown of the significant changes. First of all, we're seeking to expand water body designated uses. We're adding 3, or we wish to add 3 new classifications: a Mississippi Outstanding Water classification, a Modified Fish and Wildlife classification, and a Drainage Water classification. So with this, I want to be real clear about this. We're just establishing these categories and a process to put waters into these categories, not actually placing any specific waters into these new categories at this time. The second thing of significance is we're expanding Table 2, which is our numeric criteria for chemical specific parameters for aquatic life and human health. And what we're doing is we're bringing forward certain federal criteria into the table for which no state criteria exists. So I want to be real clear here. This is nothing new. The regulations previously referred to federal criteria in absence of state criteria. This just simply makes it easier to know what the criteria is for a specific pollutant. So it keeps you from having to go back and forth between state and federal regulations to determine an applicable criteria. So it's all now located in one document. The other benefit by doing this is it gives the department a better control of criteria rather than adopting by reference. The third addition is EPA's new ammonia toxicity criteria is going to be included in this triennial review. The ammonia toxicity will go from 2 milligrams per liter to about 1.33 milligrams per liter. We've known that this criteria was going to change for some time, and we've been including this in water quality model runs for several years now and have been informing permit holders of this change. So this summarizes the regulatory actions and updates that have taken place in the past year. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of today's program. If y'all have any questions, please contact me. I know we're kind of pressed with time, so I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Fortenberry for the Title V update.
Thank you very much. So it's good to know that I'm wearing Chad LaFontaine's old clothes well. I'm just not able to use his old computer that well, but hopefully I'll get better at it. So I am the new division chief for the air division, replacing Chad LaFontaine, who recently retired. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about some recent changes to the Title V fee law. It was amended in the thank you. It was amended in the 2020 legislative session. And basically all it did was, those changes that it just removed the details of the fee structure. All those details are still in MDEQ's Title V regs, but it took all of it out of the law. And then it added a provision where we can carry a balance, somewhat of a balance, to the next fiscal year, and that will cover the costs from operating from July 1st, which is the beginning of the next fiscal year, to September 1st, which is when we start collecting fees. And then it also removed a little bit of outdated information. And so the reason for these changes was it was literally an act of Congress to change the fee structure. The Title V program has to be adequately and equitably funded. EPA requires it to be adequately funded or they will take the program back over. And Mississippi law requires it to be equitably funded. And so the current mechanism, it just really was no longer equitable. It So I think the minimum fee is $250, and that really doesn't even pay for collecting the $250. So it's no longer really equitable. And then there were so many reductions in the 2015 reductions in emissions in the 2015 to 2017 timeframe that we truly believed that to adequately fund the program, we would be at $57 per ton right now. So, so luckily we're not there, and there's many reasons why we're not at that $57 per ton, or several reasons. It's likely, due to EPD and ECED reorganization in 2017 that streamlined some things, and a lot of retirements and turnover in positions. But that's why we're not at $57 per ton right now, as as we suspected we might be right now. But the next steps to get the fee structure changed is that the Title V Advisory Council is going to draft a new fee structure. They meet on October 28th, so we hope to have made a lot of progress towards that then. And then they will have MMA pull the Title V fee restructure work group back together with any additions as necessary to ensure that there's a good cross section of large and small Title V fee sources on that work group. That work group will troubleshoot, revise, and recommend any changes to the Title V Advisory Council. And then once they make, any changes that they receive from that work group, they will ask MDEQ to draft regulation revisions. And then we will take those regulation revisions, the draft, through the public participation process. We'll go to public notice, we'll hold a public hearing and receive comments. And then if changes to the draft regulation is necessary based on those comments, we will make those changes, and then we will take the draft regulation to the commission for action. And then if they approve the regulations, then the fee structure will be changed. It's a bit of a long process with a lot of opportunity for input from the regulated community and from the public. We won't see a change in 2021 because that whole process starts on April 1st. So we won't have this done by 2021, but hopefully in 2022 we will have a new fee structure in place.